Bonjour mes chers élèves. Alors aujourd'hui, c'est une leçon de la grammaire. So today's lesson, we're going to zero in and focus a little bit more on this topic of the past tenses. Now you have learned two past tenses and we're going to look today well, let me have a look at we're going to look today that by the end of the class, you'll be able to understand how to use the passé composé, which you learn in French too. But it's complex, so we're going to continue to learn it all the way through French 2, French 3. And the imparfait. So the imperfect tense, the en français imparfait, is the tense that you just learned in the last unit as you were talking about your childhood. And so we're not going to move on from that. So this unit, we're going to, our grammar focus is not new. It is going to review, reinforce, and you're going to gain confidence in using both the passé composé and the imparfait when narrating events. So in the context of fairy tales or stories or myths or legends, you are narrating a story. And so you are going to be telling your story in the past tense. And that's the goal. That's what you're going to be doing by the end of the unit. And so today we're going to look at how can you use both and why do we use both, in what context do we use both, the passé composé and the imparfait. Okay, so for today's lesson, you are going to be taking notes. This is a little notes grammar lesson. So again, I do not mind where you take them. You could be taking them digitally. You could have a French folder, which is physical, and have this video up on full screen and then be writing down in your folder. I don't mind. The most important thing is be organized. Do not lose these things. You will refer back to these as you are writing for your own fairy tale, your own story by the end of the unit or throughout the unit. So you cannot use dictionaries, you cannot use Google Translate, you cannot use all of these other things, but you can use your notes. So make sure you're taking great notes today. And then you're going to finish with a short practice on PowerSchool. It's going to look like a practice assessment. It's kind of like a quick quiz grade. So we'll look at that. You 100% need your notes, you need this video, and you'll do really well then in the practice on PowerSchool. So when we talk about the past, what are the similarities and differences you've noticed between using the passé composé and the imperfect tense? So if we were in class, I'd be asking you this question, turn to a partner, pair, share. You're at home probably by yourself. So just take 30 seconds to reflect on that. What are the similarities and differences you've noticed? Okay, so we're going to have a little look. Firstly, we're going to kind of focus on a couple of sentences in English. So what is the difference in meaning between these two sentences? When Alicia arrived, we were climbing the tree. When Alicia arrived, we climbed the tree. Is there a difference between those, in meaning between those two sentences? Okay. Both of those sentences are in the past tense. They're both talking about something that happened in the past. But what's the difference? So if you were here in class with me, you'd be answering back. You'd be working on it with a partner for like 30 seconds to a minute and then answering back. So both of these first parts are the same. When Alicia arrived, so she arrived. But these are different. We were climbing and we climbed the tree. So both of those ways of saying it in the past, even in English, indicates different actions. We were climbing is more of a continual, like a process of something that we were doing in the past, but we climbed as like, you know, she arrived and then we did this together. So in French, we use the past tense in the same way to indicate, and they indicate slightly different meanings in the language. So tell me, before we move on, I'm going to add in a kind of point due to the question, what tense do you think this would be in French? Passé composé or imparfait? When Alicia arrived. It would be passé composé. She arrived. And what about we were climbing? We am parfait. So am parfait is we were climbing. Remember when we looked at the last unit on childhood, anything which is like something that was continually like how you used to be, would anytime we would be used to, or we were doing this, you know, I was a great child, like over time, then we would use am parfait. We climbed is passé composé. So you can see that we could use passé composé in both parts of a sentence, or passé composé and imparfait, or just imparfait. And so last unit, we just focused on imparfait, and there was very few occasions that we were using passé composé. But to tell your narratives for this unit, I want us to go back and also look at passé composé and work on trying to perfect or trying to appropriately use both past tenses to tell great stories with great meanings. Okay, so let's get stuck into the French. You do not need to, you can copy this down if you want to. You can pause the video at any point from this point onwards. You can pause the video to write down what you need to, but I will definitely indicate the things that I'm telling you to write. So the passé composé and the imparfait, that could be your title if you don't already have a title. Both are used to talk about the past. So you're going to draw a table right here and have 3 columns. You're going to have passé composé, both, when do we use both, and then imparfait. So the first thing we're going to look at is the passé composé. When do you think we use the passé composé? Oui, yes. So we use the passé composé to say what happened or what somebody did in a set period of time. So it's not ongoing. It is, we did this, we went on vacation here, you know, this one time to Florida, and we stayed in a hotel, and we swam in the sea, and whatever, this one time. And I click because this is your little gesture to help you and me remember. It's kind of snappy. And you might not think like, well, the weekend isn't snappy, you know, if you talk about something you did at the weekend. And so we're going to look at imparfait, we're going to look at the difference in a moment, and that might help clarify for you. And sometimes there are some ambiguous areas, which could be either. But this is the clearest way that I can think of to explain it to you. And here's an example en français. Une fois, j'ai fait. So this is passé composé. J'ai fait un château de sable incroyable. So un château is a castle, de sable is sand. So once, or one time, une fois, one time, I made an incredible sandcastle. Un château de sable. So I want you to pause the video, copy this down, not just the English, but the example in French too. Okay, we're going to move on and skip over both, and we're going to go to the imparfait. So comparatively, when do we use the imparfait, and what kind of past tense meaning would we use the imparfait? Dis-moi. Oui. Okay, so there was 2 times. This is the one that we've looked at in the last unit. How to tell how things were or what used to happen over and over. So every time students ask me, how do you say she used to do this? There's no word used to in French. The imparfait, we use the ending, j'étais, like this, je faisais, j'avais. This ending indicates used to or were, something that would happen over and over. Every day we used to do this. Yeah, so this over here on a passé composé would change if it wasn't one time that you built a castle, but every day we would build a castle. We would build a castle, a sandcastle. That would then change to become imparfait, because the meaning is different. You didn't just one time build a sandcastle, you did it every day on your vacation. So let's have a look at this example. Quand j'étais jeune, nous allions à la plage chaque été. So we've got a different pronoun, nous allions, but it's the same as imparfait. À la plage, what is à la plage? Beach. Chaque été, what is été? Summer, good. So when I was young, we went to the beach every summer, each summer, every summer. So this is like a continual, like every summer when I was young, we went to the beach. So we in English would say we went to the beach, or we would go to the beach, but it's a continual thing that would happen. So we would use that imparfait. No, je suis allé. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second part, which we haven't looked at a lot, except for maybe age, is when you're describing events in the past. So any kind of description, for example, describing your age, like in this first one, when I was young or when I was little, quand j'étais petite, quand j'étais jeune, would be an age. So even if you used an actual age, quand j'avais 3 ans, when I was 3, quand j'avais 3 ans. If you're describing the weather, if you're describing feelings, you could add on here, type in here, describing appearance. Maybe I will do that for you, actually. You know, hair color, eye color, personality, etc. Any of those describing is going to be imparfait. So here's our example in French. Il faisait très beau. Il y avait beaucoup de fleurs. So again, it was beautiful, like beautiful weather. It was nice weather, or very nice weather. It's a beautiful weather. There were lots of flowers. So we're describing the scene. You can add on here scenery. And why is this important for a fairy tale? You can already start thinking in your fairy tales, you're going to be describing your main character and the other characters. What were they? Who were they? What are they in the story? So you're using the past tense, and you need to be using the imparfait when you are describing them or describing the scene. Was it a house in the woods? Was it dark and somber? Using the imparfait. Okay. So pause the video as you need to and copy down the imparfait column. Okay, once you're done with that, we're going to go to both. So in what situations would you use both the passé composé and the imparfait in the same sentence? Okay. Pardon. Okay, so you can tell what was going on in the imparfait when something else happens, an action happens in the passé composé. So here's an example. These examples are dated. These examples are from like my second year of teaching here. Exemple. Je jouais aux dames quand le téléphone a sonné. Bing, bing. Alors, je jouais aux dames is not exactly je jouais aux échecs. Je jouais aux dames is to play checkers. Okay, this was an activity that we talked about, like, actually even up till last year, but for some reason it never came up this year. Maybe none of you ever played checkers or never played when you were younger or never thought to talk about it in French. But in my previous classes we have. So, je jouais aux dames quand le téléphone a sonné. Bring, 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 bring. So I was playing checkers when the telephone rang. So the telephone wasn't ringing, ringing, ringing all the time while I was playing checkers. It's like you were in the middle of playing checkers when the telephone started to ring. So anyway, that's just these examples are taken more from the past unit of childhood. As we go forward, you can think about different examples where you might do this for a fairy tale. So the girl was playing in the forest when the witch appeared. So, and you know, so creative that I think about all these sentences that are simple that you can write not in English, but in French. And so you understand, like, this is what you're going to be doing when you're narrating a story. There are going to be things like this, but then something happens. Something happens while something was happening. So pause the video, copy this down, and have these notes as your reference. We're going to build on these notes over the next few weeks going forward. Hold on, class. Okay, so before we move on to the next bit where we're just going to practice, there's one other little thing I want to point out to you, the thing that we're going to add on to our notes. So here we have une fois, quand, and then things like chaque, whatever. So these are time indicators. They are little things that we can put in our writing, in our speaking, to indicate whether it's a one-time event, like une fois is always going to be once. Une fois means once or one time. Quand means when. So when doesn't always indicate, it doesn't always indicate something like immediate, like look here, when I was younger. It doesn't always, but it can in this context mean like something was happening when something happened. And chaque usually indicates like each and every, it's a continual thing. You know, every day I brush my hair, every day I brush my teeth, every day I, you know, would do this, whatever. So this is something, time indicators, you can kind of either circle them, underline them, up to you in terms of your notes, but there's gonna be another lesson or brief part of a lesson, and as we go forward, I'm gonna pull out more, and I want you to keep creating a list, and you can write your time indicators like below. So these notes here are not gonna change. They're going to stay the same, but you might put time indicators within the column. So une fois clearly goes in this column. And then there'll be other ones which we'll look at, which indicate the passé composé. And they will really help you to focus on, I'm using une fois, it needs to be passé composé. I'm using this, it needs to be, I'm using chaque, you know, the little girl, every day, the little girl, or each day, the little girl would play by herself in the deep dark forest. And you're using chaque, then you know you need to use imparfait. Okay, so anyway, we're going to come back to time indicators in another lesson, but you might want to keep your columns open-ended so that you can keep your time indicators in the future will be added on to this. Okay, so in this part of the lesson, I want you to pause the video, have a look at these sentences, and they're all in English, so I think in terms of our comprehension, hold on, the bells are all off today after the time change yesterday. Anyway, when you look at these sentences and read them, I want you to just kind of indicate whether they are passé composé or imparfait, or both. Okay, so you can make a little note of it. You can copy this down actually as examples if you want to. And then the next step after that will be to translate it into French. So don't do that part yet. I just want you to identify if it's passé composé, imparfait, or both. Pause the video and then come back. Okay, so let's have a look at the sentences. Numéro 1 is last winter it snowed a lot. That is imparfait because we're describing the weather. And last winter is like a period of time as well. If you were saying last winter it snowed a lot, but one day it thunderstormed, that one day would be passé composé, okay? Anyway, numéro 2, when we were younger, we used to love to read. Imparfait. Describing age, describing an activity. We've got when we were, we used to, those are indications of imparfait. My sister was playing volleyball when she broke her leg. This is both. Because here was playing, this was an action she was doing, it's imparfait, But when she broke her leg is passé composé, right? Because she wasn't continually breaking her leg. Her leg wasn't breaking. It broke. So that's both. Numéro 4. They got married last year is passé composé. Often when we talk about somebody getting married, it's a one-time thing. They got married. They weren't forever getting married. In a process, they got married. Last weekend, I went shopping with my mother. Now, this one's a little bit more ambiguous, but I would put this in the passé composé. You're not always regularly going shopping. You went shopping. Numéro 6. We were going to the cinema when I saw the problem. Is both. We were going is imparfait. When I saw the problem, passé composé. Numéro 7. I loved my teacher because she always used to help me. What a great teacher. Is imparfait. I would put both of those. This is an emotion. You know, I loved my teacher, and then she always, anything that's always is going to be imparfait. Used to. It's definitely imparfait. Okay, last one, numéro 8. I had a headache last night. I think this is probably the hardest one. It probably could be both, actually. You could either use imparfait or either use passé composé. But most of the time, I would put this in imparfait because it's just describing like how you're feeling or how your ailment. Arguably, you could use passé composé. Okay, so I would choose to put imparfait. All right, so now you have those. I'm going to, let's skip over this one. All right, so I want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about how you were to translate those. Move me down here to the bottom. How would you translate those sentences? And I've given you like the main part of the phrase, and you've just got to fill in the gaps. Now in class we would do this, you know, with partners, etc. So I just want you to perhaps set your timer for like, I'd say probably no more than 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less, 3 minutes, to try and work on these. And if you get stuck on one, move on to the next one and just go through and just do as much as you can. You can write it down in your notes as examples, or you can just think about it. Okay, how would you do that? And then we'll go through it together. So pause the video, 3 minutes, and then come back. Okay, I'm actually gonna change this around so I can write a little bit better. I'm gonna make it a little bit thinner. Okay, so let's do numéro 1. I think they're gonna do the announcements though. What's going on with this? Okay, pardon. I lost the ability to pause the recording, and they did the announcements and stuff in the morning. So I've lost the thing that was on the screen that indicated whether it's passé composé, but luckily I know. So I'm going to go through the answers with you now, and let's see if you, like kind of how you did with it. So last winter it snowed a lot. L'hiver dernier, il neigeait beaucoup. Il neigeait beaucoup. And remember, we're going to keep this E in because otherwise it'll be neige. So we have to have neiger. Numéro 2, when we were younger, quand nous étions jeunes, we used to love music. Well, we could say aimions, ou nous adorions. Either would be fine. Lire. My sister was playing, so ma sœur jouait. So remember, we don't need the was playing. Jouer, this A indicates was something, indicates the imparfait. So it's just very simple. Ma sœur jouait au volleyball quand elle. All right, now this is complicated because this is passé composé, right? But we have a reflexive. Remember way back in French 2, one of the last things that we did before we broke up for spring and didn't come back was to break something like when we did the unit on health is reflexive, so it's something to ourselves, and this uses the être in the passé composé. So quand elle s'est cassée la jambe. Compliqué. And again, here we have, this isn't a reflexive, but it is similar to a reflexive. It's actually a reciprocal verb, but this is the, we'll look at this again next semester. We do a whole unit on love and friendship, and so se marier comes into play. So we're going to use this one, which is ils se sont mariés l'année dernière. Last weekend I went shopping. Le weekend dernier, oh, I didn't leave myself much space there. J'ai fait du shopping. There's different things we could say. J'ai fait du shopping, j'ai fait du course, j'ai fait des magasins avec ma mère. Numéro 6, we were going to the cinema. So, imparfait. Nous allions au cinéma quand I saw. What is that? It's not regarder. Regarder is to watch or to look at. I looked at the problem or I watched the problem. No, I saw the problem. It's the verb voir. So, quand j'ai vu le problème. Numéro 7, I loved my teacher. So again, right up here where we have aimer or adorer, you can use either of those. And I use j'aimais, but you could use j'adorais, that's fine. Ma prof, Pascal, and so she used to help me. What is the verb to help? Aider. Aider. Pascal m'aidait toujours. So this is she used to. Again, there's no word in French for used to. It's indicated in this, is implied, or used to is in this ending. Toujours is always. So she helped me always. She always helped me. All right, and then the last one, I had a headache last night. I'm going to put it in the imparfait. You could do it in either. It's a lot easier in the imparfait. J'avais mal à la tête hier soir. Last night, hier soir. J'avais mal à la tête. Aïe. Okay, if there's any of that you want to copy down, maybe not some of the things which are maybe a little bit more confusing, but you know, you might have something in your story where you talk about the prince and princess got married and you're like, that could be super useful. So anyway, up to you. You don't have to copy down the whole thing, but there may be some phrases in there, and in terms of your timing and your dedication and commitment to learning French, you might want to. So pause the video as you need to, and then come back to the rest of it. Okay, so we are done. You are now going to demonstrate to me what you understand. So how to use the passé composé, the imparfait, and when it's appropriate to use both. And so there is a 10-question quiz, which is on the practice assessment block on PowerSchool. The first 5 questions are all vrai ou faux. And the second set of 5 questions, 6 à 10, are all sentences where I want you to identify when, and they're in English, because if I put them in French, then you would clearly see whether it's passé composé, imparfait, or both. So they're in English, but what would you say would need to use if we were to write that in French? Would we need to use the passé composé, the imparfait, or both? Okay, so use this video, use your notes, and do the best that you can. Merci beaucoup. Please let me know if you're struggling with anything. If you are an in-person student, you can wait to come and speak to me the next day or the next time that you see me, if that's easier. Okay, au revoir.